All right, so today we are diving into The Wild Robot,
Oh,
this
yeah.
animated film.
Okay.
It's about a robot mom raising a baby goose
Interesting.
on a wild island.
All right. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so it's like this
Ugh.
fish out of water story, but with a robot.
Yeah, I see that. And it's based on a book, right?
It is, it is.
I think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah, I love the book.
Okay.
But the film seems to really lean into the emotional aspect of the story,
Okay.
especially with Lupita Nyong'o and Pedro Pascal doing the voices.
Wow. Those are some big names.
Yeah, big time.
So you've got this classic fish out of water story, a heartwarming premise.
Right.
And then they bring in these powerhouse actors to really bring it to life.
And they do bring
Yeah.
it to life. I mean,
Yeah.
reviewers are saying that Lupita Nyong'o, as the robot mom, she imbues this warmth into the character.
Wow, that's interesting because how do you make a robot sound warm?
Right.
That seems almost counterintuitive.
It's all in the voice acting.
Yeah, it really speaks to her skill, her talent as an actor.
You know what I was thinking about?
What's that?
When you hear a performance like that,
Okay.
how much of it is in the writing versus the actual vocal delivery?
That's a really good question. It's what are the subtle things she's doing with her voice to make you feel that warmth?
Like a magic trick almost.
It really is the magic of voice acting, and we rarely stop to think about it.
For sure. And speaking of things that are magical,
Okay.
the animation style in this film.
Yeah, what about it?
Reviewers are saying it's very painterly. They're comparing it to Spider-Verse,
Really
but with a nature documentary feel to it.
interesting combination. I wonder if that's a trend we're seeing in animation.
What do you mean?
Well, instead of going for that hyper-realistic CGI look, a lot of studios now are embracing a more stylized approach.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, Isle of Dogs, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Every frame in that film felt like a work of art.
That's a good point.
And it seems like The Wild Robot is tapping into that same kind of visual language.
Yeah, it's pushing the boundaries of what animation can be visually.
Exactly. And, it's the difference between looking at a high-definition photograph versus, a Van Gogh painting.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Both can be beautiful. Both can be captivating.
But they make you feel different things.
Exactly. And this move towards stylized animation, it allows filmmakers to emphasize certain emotions or themes
That's interesting.
in a way that photorealism just can't.
So it creates an atmosphere.
Exactly. And The Wild Robot, from what I'm hearing, it does that beautifully.
So we've got these stunning visuals. We've got the incredible voice acting.
Right.
But what about the story itself?
Yeah.
The heart of the film.
Wow.
The reviews that I've read say that the film does a really good job balancing humor with genuine emotion,
Okay.
especially when it comes to the themes of parenting.
That makes sense given the premise.
Right. Parenting can be heartwarming, but it can also be heartbreaking.
And sometimes it's both at the same time.
Exactly. And it sounds like the film doesn't shy away from those more challenging aspects of parenting.
Oh, interesting. So it goes there.
It does. And I think that's what resonates with people.
Yeah, there's a certain depth to that emotional landscape that can connect with viewers of all ages.
For sure.
Some reviews mentioned a particular scene where, and I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but
No.
it sounds like a very poignant scene that really highlights the film's willingness to tackle some of those tougher emotions.
And that complexity is probably what elevates it.
Yeah, it's not just a simple family-friendly adventure.
Right, exactly. And it makes me even more curious about some of the criticisms that I've seen.
Really?
Because no film is perfect, right?
That's true.
And while it seems like the visuals, the voice acting, the emotional weight are all strong points,
Right.
there are some reviewers who've pointed out a few potential drawbacks.
Okay, I'm listening.
So one of the things that I saw pop up a few times,
Okay.
it has to do with the ending of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Some reviewers found that it kind of takes a tonal shift.
Interesting.
It gets a little too action-packed in the climax,
I see.
which feels at odds with the more, gentle tone of the rest of the movie.
It is tricky, especially with these family films.
Yeah.
You want an exciting ending, of course.
Right.
But you also don't want to go too over the top.
Right, you don't want to alienate part of your audience.
Exactly, and especially if they've connected with those quieter, more emotional moments.
And then on top of that, a few reviewers mentioned that the climax,
Yeah.
it kind of falls back on some familiar tropes.
What do you mean?
The classic good versus evil showdown,
Oh, I see.
which those tropes can work,
Right.
but they can also feel a little predictable, especially if you've seen a lot of these animated films.
It's like we were talking about earlier with the visuals.
How so?
It's like how going for that hyper-realistic look can sometimes make a film feel generic.
Right.
Relying too much on those narrative tropes, it kind of prevents a film from being truly unique.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Like, it might stop it from really breaking new ground.
And then there's the humor.
Okay.
Some critics thought it was a little darker than they expected. Like, some of them even used the word Far Side-esque,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It just depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
I think that's the thing with humor. It's so subjective.
Totally.
What one person finds hilarious, another person might find totally off-putting.
Right.
It's hard to say without seeing it for myself, but maybe the filmmakers were trying to do something different with the humor.
Like what?
Like maybe they used it to explore some of the darker themes in a way that's unexpected.
That's an interesting take.
Right. Like using humor as a way to tackle difficult subjects.
I mean, it's been done before.
For sure. Think about WALL-E, for example.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
That film dealt with some pretty heavy themes, but it was also really funny.
Right.
So, yeah, even with those criticisms, it sounds like The Wild Robot is still generating a lot of buzz.
Oh, for sure.
It seems like a film that's trying to be ambitious, you know?
Yeah, and even if it doesn't always stick the landing,
Right.
it sounds like it's at least striving for something more than just your typical animated movie.
And sometimes those are the most interesting films to talk about, the ones that take risks.
Totally. Even if those risks don't always pay off.
Exactly. They say perfection is the enemy of progress, right?
Love that.
Sometimes those flaws, those imperfections, they're actually what make a film more interesting, more human even.
That's a good way to put it.
It reminds us that art is a process, and even the most talented filmmakers don't always get it perfect.
And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
whether or not you see a particular film,
Right.
it's a personal decision.
It is.
We can listen to what the critics say.
Sure.
We can analyze the artistic choices and all that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to what you as a viewer are looking for in a film. So where are we at with this Wild Robot film?
Yeah. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground.
We've talked about the amazing visuals.
Right, like that painterly style.
And the voice acting of Lupita Nyong'o. Come on.
It's impressive. Right, to make a robot sound so...
Warm.
Exactly, warm and motherly.
But then there's the ending that throws people off.
Yeah, that tonal shift is a common criticism.
And maybe it relies a bit too much on those classic animated movie tropes.
Which can be a bit predictable.
But then again, even with those criticisms, it sounds like it's still a film that sparks debate.
Oh, absolutely. And that's always exciting, isn't it? A film that gets people talking.
It is. It means it's doing something right, even if it's not perfect.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're here to do on this deep dive.
How so?
Well, we're not here to tell anyone what to think about a film.
We just give you the information.
Right. It's like we're giving you a toolkit.
I like that.
A toolkit of different perspectives and insights.
So our listeners can make up their own minds.
Exactly. It's all about empowering the audience.
And maybe even sparking some lively debates along the way.
Right. Like, how much tonal dissonance is acceptable in a film like this? Or whether or not a predictable plot takes away from the emotional impact.
It's all up for discussion.
And I bet The Wild Robot is going to lead to some interesting conversations.
You know what I think would be interesting?
What's that?
To compare this film to other animated movies that deal with more mature themes.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, Up comes to mind immediately.
Oh, yeah. With that opening sequence.
Heartbreaking, right?
Definitely. And it's still a movie that kids and adults love.
Exactly. Or what about Toy Story 3?
Oh, man. That one gets me every time.
Those themes of change and letting go, they hit hard.
They do.
Yeah.
So how do you think The Wild Robot would stack up against those films?
That's a great question, and it's something for our listeners to consider.
If you're up for the challenge.
Right. If you're looking for a thought-provoking double feature.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about engaging with these films on a deeper level.
Absolutely. And that's something we always encourage here on The Deep Dive.
So as we wrap things up,
Yeah, it's time to let our listeners go explore.
if you're intrigued by what you've heard about The Wild Robot,
Those stunning visuals,
powerhouse voice acting,
and the heartwarming story of a robot mom and her goose.
maybe give it a shot.
But be prepared
For what?
for a bit of an emotional roller coaster.
And maybe have some tissues handy.
You've been warned.
Until next time.